Today I wanted to give you a preview of the lectures that you're going to be hearing so that you can get in your mind the way the course is going to go. The first lecture that you will hear will be a lecture of me interviewing another student, Caitlin Plache, and Caitlin and I are going to be talking about communication in general. Now that's going to serve two purposes. One purpose is to introduce you to the field of communication as I understand it. But the second purpose of that is for you to analyze Caitlin and my's interview, to look at it from the point of view of how would you, as a person who's looking at our interaction, evaluate it. And it's very good for you to start doing that because obviously one of the purposes of this class is for you to learn how to analyze people's communication. Even though Caitlin and I are not there in person, I think it'll be perfectly fine for you to do that. On the other hand, if you want to, you could have an interview in your own classroom and analyze that interview as a live communication. But whatever you do, that's going to be the first type or introduction to the course that you're going to have. In an interview setting, I'm going to be talking with someone, and in the process of talking to them, we will begin to discuss the nature of communication. The second lecture that I have begins the discussion of my communication model. And just remember that I talk about communication behaviors as being adaptations of human needs. And I talk about those needs, I'll talk about the psychological forms that go along with those, of which communication behavior is a manifestation. And so that's the very next lecture, is I will talk about the basic human needs which provoke and which prompt communication behaviors. And there are a list of 14 of these. I'll go over those later, but they include so many things such as the nurturance of offspring, thermoregulation, social interaction. All of those are needs that people have that come out through the form of communication. And that's lecture number 2. In lecture number 3, I continue discussing my model of communication. And in lecture 3, I'll be talking about what I call, for lack of a better term, psychological forms that interact with our needs to govern and direct our communication behaviors. And I mention 4 psychological forms, and those are reciprocity, approach avoidance, similarity, attraction, and proximity, and closure. Those are all manifested as some form of psychological need that governs our interaction. Reciprocity is just as you would expect, my doing something and you're responding back to me as I have communicated with you in a positive or unfortunately sometimes in a negative way. Reciprocal relationships and reciprocity in terms of especially imitation begin to build the foundation for interaction. Approach avoidance behaviors are behaviors that we read from other people that let us know whether or not we can begin to develop relationships with them by either approaching them or actually avoiding their presence. Similarity, attraction, and proximity are what I call the essential triad for the development of human relationships. Proximity means closeness, physical closeness. It can also mean psychological closeness, but by that I'm usually meaning physical closeness to someone. Similarity that we have with someone, and this could be similarity in terms of looks, certainly, but most often similarity refers to personality similarity, cultural similarity, and socioeconomic similarity, which causes us then to be attracted to people and to want to build relationships with them. And the fourth psychological form I'll talk about is closure, which is the need for completion. The need to feel like we're in control, the need to be able to predict and control, and to feel like we understand, we have a comprehension of what's going on in our relationships. That's the third lecture that you will hear. The fourth lecture has to do with the effect of the subconscious on human interaction. And more research is coming out and has been coming out, and I think will continue to come out that emphasizes the tremendous and tremendously significant role that the human subconscious plays in interaction. For this lecture, I will be drawing heavily on a book that you might, on your own, might want to read. It's called The Social Animal by David Brooks. There are other things, other studies and things that I call upon, but that's the primary one. Tremendous influence of our subconscious on the way we interact. The next lecture is going to be a lecture on ritual, because all of these needs that we have and these psychological forms and this impetus to communicate drawn upon by the subconscious promotes ritualized communication, because it gives us a sense of stability, it gives us a sense of predictability, and it gives us a sense of community and draws us toward other people and draws us into relationships. So I will talk about what ritual is, how it's formed, what purposes it serves. Rituals from things such as just greetings of other people, having meals with other people, or actually rituals in the form of maybe funeral practices or marriage ceremonies. Now, in addition to my lecture, there will be accompanying with that an interview that I have with Dr. Monty Cox, who is an expert on ritual. It's one of his favorite subjects. And Dr. Cox and I will sit here before you and discuss ritual. The next discussion that I will have with you after ritual is the significant role that nonverbal communication plays in our interaction. And actually, I'm going to subdivide this lecture into two parts, part 1 and part 2, because my taping of it was fairly long. But you will have two different discussions of nonverbal communication. Now, in the process of doing that, I'm also going to have an interview with Dr. Jeff Hopper, and he and I are going to be discussing the role of music and universal forms of music in communication, because I think this is certainly a fascinating type of nonverbal communication. So you're going to get two discussions by me on the effects of nonverbal communication on behavior, and in addition, you're going to have an interview that you will be able to see, a discussion between Dr. Hopper and myself on music and communication. And the final lecture that you will hear is going to be on verbal messages. Now, because of the fact that you are listening to this lecture in a foreign environment, and because your communication course exists in a situation in which you may not know the native language, it's difficult for us, and impossible actually, for us to begin to assess verbal communication in Italy or Greece, whatever, because the primary way that we'll be able to analyze communication in a country where we are not native speakers is through nonverbal communication, rituals, forms, and the things I talked about before. However, I wanted to talk about verbal communication just so you can understand the significance of words and the way we and everyone else in the world interacts. Even though you may not know the exact words someone is saying, you can understand the significance of the verbal messages generally, and certainly you can begin to assess the impact of verbal communication in your own life. This is an overview of the course that will allow you, I think, to begin to be analyzers rather than reactionaries to the human communication that you will be encountering in whichever foreign program you happen to be attending.